welcome you to the 2012 Libertarian Party of Indiana State Convention. Our first order of business this morning is, we were going to call it a presidential debate, but I learned now it's a job interview for the position of Libertarian Party candidate for President of the United States. We have 3 candidates that made it with us here today, and our moderator, many of you know, is Abdul Hakim-Shabazz of radio fame in Indiana. If you don't already, if you're from the metro area, if you don't already subscribe to his cheat sheet, his gossip rag that comes out sometimes multiple times a week about local politics, I would advise you to do so. It's $20 a quarter. Money well spent, and very interesting. And we even get a mention in it from time to time. Usually our candidates don't do anything like call male prostitutes to their hotel rooms
or pick fights with the Girl Scouts.
Or pick fights with the Girl Scouts, or try to remove license plates from legitimate organizations. So we might not make it as often as the old parties, but we'll pitch in there and keep trying. Abdul is going to be the moderator for our job interview debate this morning, and I will let him explain the rules, and we'll get on with this. Enjoy it, and I don't think we're going to have the same rules about clapping and applauding and cheering if you hear an answer that you like that the Indiana Debate Commission voice on us when we participate in statewide debates. We're libertarians. Do whatever you want to.
No, appreciate the opportunity to come here and kind of touch me in a special place there. It's like Goldstein, come on. 8 o'clock. No, I appreciate the opportunity to come here and actually, I think for the first time in my 20-something odd years of covering government and politics, actually hosting a presidential debate, so I'll try to do as good a job as John King and George Stephanopoulos and the rest of those guys. Of course, I do find my libertarian friends to be much more fun and entertaining than my Republican and Democratic friends, so I can't think of a better way to spend Saturday morning. The rules are pretty simple. We'll have 2 minutes for opening statements. We'll do some Q&A. Candidates, since we only have 3 of them here today, will have 2 minutes to respond to the question. The lovely lady right here, Cindy, will be our official timekeeper. She'll give you the 30-second mark. We have 30 seconds left. She'll give you a 15 and then a stop, and then I have a gavel if you continue to keep talking. Never had to use a gavel before, but hey, you never know. And then we'll have 2 minutes for closing. We do know that sometimes in debates that once in a while the candidate may have his or her name invoked by another candidate. And what some moderators will do is they'll wait until you get to your time to respond. Unfortunately, the way these things can work at times, by the time that candidate gets a chance to respond, no one remembers what the question was and vice versa. So I'm going to invoke a little bit of chairman's privilege, and that if you do invoke or I deem as an attack on another candidate, I will immediately, once you've read your statement, give them 30 seconds for a rebuttal, just to kind of keep it moving. Hopefully, this is a forum of debate about ideas and issues, and not necessarily about individuals. We also have some questions from the audience that you folks have put out, and I have those here. We'll kind of sort of sift through those and throw those in as well. And ultimately, my goal is to have you folks done and all wrapped up nicely by 10 o'clock. It's just to keep the program moving. So that is what we are here for. And sometime between now and then, might have Spain will grab me some more coffee. Because I love you guys, but no offense. This is a shot glass, right? Okay. And it's a tiny shot glass. What? I'll split up. Barbarians. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, let us begin the 2012 Libertarian Party of Indiana State Convention with this candidates forum. Our candidates are Mr. Lee Wright, Mr. Gary Johnson, and Mr. Jim Burns. And Mr. Burns, you may begin with your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Happy days. I bring wonderful tidings. I'm a messenger. Sometimes my message is thought of as if it's a secret, but it's no secret. It's in 2 parts. Part 1. People should be allowed to live as they choose, so long as they do not initiate force, threaten to initiate force, or engage in fraud. Now, many people think that this is shocking, but this is the way the average person lives the vast majority of their lives. As a matter of fact, it's so important that when people do not follow it, we have a name for such behavior. We call it criminal. Most people follow libertarianism the vast majority of the time, and they live their lives that way. But the second part of the secret is that when people are allowed to live in this fashion, we have peace, prosperity, and progress. What we get is a vast improvement of the human condition. I don't know, I think most of you are aware of this particular phrase. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Well, this is self-evident. And with modern technology, you can look at the Earth from the sky, from a satellite. And if you look down at the Korean Peninsula, you'll find the proof in ample display. In the north, it's dark at night. In the south, it's bright and shiny. And that's because they have just a little bit of libertarianism in the south. And if you go down in the daytime, you'll find that people in the north and the south are taller, they're in better physical health, and they live happier lives because totalitarianism does not work. And freedom does.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Governor Johnson.
I think the country is in really deep trouble. I think we're going to suffer a monetary collapse unless we get our spending under control. I'm making 3 promises as President of the United States. One is I promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. That's not promising a balanced budget, that's promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress, which would be a $1.4 trillion reduction in government spending. I'm also promising to veto any legislation where expenses exceed revenue, believing that with those 2 promises, spending will be less than any other scenario that you could possibly come up with, believing that Congress will actually override that veto. Lastly, I'm going to advocate on the part of throwing out the entire federal tax system. No income tax, no corporate tax, no more tax withholding, and replace it with a consumption tax. In particular, I embrace the fair tax. It's a complete package that I think reboots the American economy for the next 100 years. I think it's the answer when it comes to American exports, making American exports 23% more competitive. It's the answer to China. I think it's also the answer when it comes to jobs. If in a 0 corporate tax rate environment, the private sector doesn't create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know what we do to create tens of millions of jobs. I believe in the power of the individual. I believe in marriage equality. I think it's a constitutionally guaranteed equality. I think we need to stop torture and detainment without charge. I oppose the death penalty. I fundamentally support a woman's right to choose. There is nothing that I want to see the government fix when it comes to the internet. Let's not build a fence across the border. Let's make it as easy as possible for somebody who wants to come into this country and work to get a work visa. I support a strong national defense, but I think defense is the operative word, not offense and not nation building. And in my proposal, when it comes to the budget, that would be a 43% reduction in military spending.
Thank you, sir. Next contender, Mr. H. Lee Wrights. Oh, I'm sorry, my apologies.
People have a lot of trouble with my name for one reason or another.
You think with a name like Abdul, you...
Thank you for having us today. I appreciate the opportunity to sit before you on this job interview, as we like to call it. That's not a good sign. I'll hold on to it. People always ask us everywhere we go, if you were elected president, and I will entertain that fantasy for just a moment, what's the first thing you're going to do? I have the same answer everywhere I go. Tell the American people, the people of the world, America is declaring peace. It's one of the biggest things we have to deal with in our country right now is the military and and how we use it, and how we use it very badly. It's a shame that we have a president who's actually given the Nobel Peace Prize and has since then bombed 6 or 7 countries. I find that horrible. It's not going to happen in the Libertarian administration if I have anything to do about it. We need peace in order to have prosperity. That is what we have found as we have gone through our judgments and you know, looking over the different conflicts that we've had and throughout our history. Economic boom always follows a peace treaty. Every time we declare peace, we have an economic boom. So let's try it again. Let's try it now. This is what we need. We're involved in so many places all over the world. People are dying. We're breaking our economy and the money that we have to spend to support these things. So I'm running for president so that we can declare peace. And the Libertarian Party can become the party of peace. Principle, prosperity, peace. That's what we stand for.
Those are opening statements, and now we'll begin with Q&A. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to give his response. Gentlemen, the first question is something I thought of as I drove up here today to moderate this forum. Obviously, it's pretty clear that everybody in this room will more than likely vote Libertarian in November 2012. The big question is, how do you get people who are non-Libertarians to vote Libertarian? And Mr. Burns, we'll start with you.
Getting votes is often like courting. I'm sorry, but you don't win fair lady by sitting over in the corner. That's my problem. I always sit over in the corner and I don't have fair lady. What you need is you have to ask them to vote for you. You have to give them good reason. You have to be, well, in my case, it wouldn't help. You should be attractive, but Gary will take care of that for us. The way to get votes is to ask for them and to present yourself nicely. Thank you.
Governor Johnson.
Well, I happen to think that Libertarian encompasses the best of both parties, and that would be the notion of being fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And when I say socially liberal, I mean getting government out of our personal lives and allow us to make decisions that only you and I should make. So I happen to think that when we were in college, the notion that if you weren't a Democrat, you didn't have a heart, and that after you graduated, if you didn't become a Republican, you didn't have a brain. I have a sense that all of us have hearts and brains, and that that's the Libertarian Party. So election, in this case, I really do see an opportunity here to win this election, or I wouldn't be doing it. And I think it hinges on the fact that Libertarians do embrace the notion of what I think most Americans are. And so it's identifying the problems, it's identifying the solutions that go along with the problems, and then it's having a resume to suggest that you're going to actually doggedly pursue the agenda that you've laid out. I think there is a real opportunity here, and that pie-in-the-sky opportunity here is to potentially poll at 15% and be in the national debates against Obama, and I'm believing that the Republican nominee is going to be Romney. And at that point, I think anything can happen, given the fact that 80% of Americans now are saying they would consider voting for a third-party candidate. This is unprecedented. When Perot ran against Clinton and Bush, 40% of Americans said they would consider voting for a third-party candidate, and he got 20% of the vote. So there is a real opportunity here that I think, at a minimum, Libertarians have a chance to change the world a little bit.
Thank you. Mr. Wrights.
Well, Governor Johnson's absolutely correct. We have a wonderful opportunity laid out before us because the American people are sick and tired of the status quo. They're sick and tired of being lied to, sick and tired of having promises made to them and then broken time and time and time again, year after year, decade in, decade out. For 150 years, we've had a system where Democrats or Republicans, bat us all together back and forth like a tennis ball. Promise us this, promise that. Libertarians got to be different if we want to make a difference. Now, I've always said that we're not going to achieve our electoral success by convincing enough Democrats or Republicans to cross that line and vote for us. But half the people in this country don't vote. And they don't vote because they're stupid, or because they don't care, or because they've lost interest. American people are smart. They know what I just told you is the truth. What's the sense of going down and voting for anybody if you're just going to get the same no matter who you vote for? One flavor or the other, you just get the same taste in your mouth. Nobody wants that anymore. We got to be different. One of the things this campaign is doing, I'm real proud of, we just started, I want all of you to go to millionvotemarch.com. We have a chance to offer everyone, ourselves and the rest of the country, a chance to do something first. You only get to be first one time. We've never had 1 million votes for a Libertarian candidate. This is a project to try to get that. Whether I'm the candidate or not, this will follow through for the candidate of the Libertarian Party. Let's get 1 million votes this time. There's got to be at least 1 million people in this country that don't want war. There's got to be at least 1 million people in this country that don't want the drug war. We have the issues. Let's make it happen this time.
Thank you. Gentlemen, one of the things that always happens in quintessential presidential debates is there's always a lot of talk and individuals speak in generalities, but never really get to specifics. So I want to spend a little bit of time, if you don't mind, actually tackling some specifics. And Governor Johnson, we'll start this question with you. If you are elected president, what specific federal programs would you cut?
I am specifically going to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013, and that is a 43% reduction in government spending. And I like to start off by talking about Medicaid, Medicare, and military spending. I oversaw the reform of Medicaid in New Mexico. We took it from a fee-for-service model to a managed care model. We saved hundreds of millions of dollars, and we set up a better health care network to do that. I believe at the time that if the federal government would have block granted the state of New Mexico 43% less money, done away with all the strings and the mandates, that I could have effectively overseen the delivery of health care to the poor. I maintain the same for Medicare, that if the federal government would give the states 43% less money, take away all the strings and the mandates, since of course Medicare is not a program that is administered by the states currently, but that the states could oversee that. 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, I believe that's exactly what we will have happen. So that's Medicaid, Medicare. Those are the biggies, along with military spending. Military spending, what's a 43% reduction in military spending? That's reducing nuclear warheads from 2,300 to 500. That's the military footprint that we have on the planet. That's bases, that's troops on the ground in Europe, Japan, South Korea. Those are the conflicts that we're currently engaged in. Let's disengage from those conflicts. That's intelligence, that's research and development, that's the military that are in uniform, and that's the military support staff that goes along with that. Specifically eliminating the Department of Education, specifically eliminating housing and urban development, specifically eliminating Homeland Security, open to elimination of any department of federal government.
Thank you, Governor. Ms. Burns, specifically, what government programs would you cut in order to balance the budget?
A person who is elected President of the United States, before they take office, must take an oath. The same oath I took when I joined the Marine Corps. Is to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Nowhere in the Constitution does it allow the federal government to have a thing such as the Department of Energy, of Education, of OSHA. The DEA is not authorized in the United States Constitution. If I'm elected president, those things would go on day one because they're unconstitutional. Many people say that we have to have a line item veto. That's not true. If I were president of the United States, any bill that went before me that was more than 8 pages long, I wouldn't read it, wouldn't pay any attention to it, I would just throw it away. If they can't say it in 8 pages and do it just one a day, I won't even consider it. The next thing is that, well, there's one minor exception. If the law is to eliminate current law, I would go beyond 8 pages. Wouldn't have to do that very often. The power of the executive is very strong to defend the United States Constitution. If I were elected president, I would defend the Constitution of the United States and therefore establish libertarianism in our country. Thank you.
Mr. Wrights.
Well, now, really, I don't complain about questions in a debate, but to ask a question like this and only give a guy 2 minutes, and then let the other 2 guys go ahead, I mean, use all the good stuff. Everything you said is true. There is so much that we need to get rid of. It's almost impossible to tackle it in just 2 minutes. That's why I tell everybody wherever I go, I'm not running for president so I can do things. I'm running so I can undo things. I want to undo all the unnecessary, unconstitutional things that we're doing, particularly at the executive level, and that specifically points to all the foreign interventions that I've already discussed. Of course, doing away with those would be a handful, but it's probably easier to tell you what we would keep. There's only like 5, I think, original departments, included in the cabinet. I don't see why we need many more than that. One of the things I really like to concentrate on is TSA and Homeland Security, which is a redundant department in the first place. We've always had Department of Defense, and that's what we need, and we need to keep that. Do away with Homeland Security. In the 10 years that the TSA has been involved in our airports, they have confiscated everything from sharp combs to little bitty old pocket knives you could put somebody's eye out with, a bunch of cigarette lighters. One thing they've never confiscated in 10 years of existence is a terrorist. What's the point? We need to seek out exactly programs and agencies like this and do away with them. We are breaking this country to the point where our children are born with, what, $40,000 in debt? Before they even draw their first breath, they're $40,000 in debt. It's time we do something for our children, bring them peace and prosperity.
Thank you. Gentlemen, you've all outlined a number of things as we continue our sort of budgetary financial discussion that would eliminate. But as you all know, there's a legislative branch of government. One house controlled by Democrats, one by Republicans. Assuming that in the 2012 election that status quo is maintained, how would you, as a Libertarian president with a Democratic Senate and a Republican Congress, Republican House of Representatives, how exactly would you function? And Mr. Wrights, we will start with you. Since you had the last time around.
I'm tempted to say just shoot me, it'd be quicker. Libertarian president with a Democrat, Republican House and Senate, either one. Now, it's going to be a headache. It's going to be a struggle. The president's not going to have any help, which is what he needs. There are things that he can do. We've got executive orders, and I plan on spending a good 6 months just undoing all the executive orders that have been done down through the years. He is a commander-in-chief. That's why I'm focusing so much on this war issue. I mean, I say I'm going to declare peace, and people say, well, how are you going to do that? Well, it's fairly simple. Since no one's bothered to seek a declaration of war since World War II, these interventions can be spoken out of existence just as easily as they were spoken into existence. And all that is required is a man or a woman willing to stand up, take the job, and do what they say, do what they promise the American people when they get in office. That's what we can do. All we can do, each one of us, the best we can do is set a good example by the way we live our lives, by our rhetoric, by the way we conduct ourselves. We've got to show people it's not, being a libertarian is not a scary thing. Who better to do that than the president? To live as a libertarian in the highest office in the land, to set a good example. Honestly, I think this may work in our favor. Because having a libertarian president is going to show even more so than is shown now how ridiculous Congress really is. To have somebody up there that's going to point out all this nonsense that they're doing, I think it would be a great thing. It'd be hard to get things done, but I'm used to hard things, and you can't run me off with the stick. So let's get this job done.
Thank you. Governor Johnson, how do you work with so the status quo is maintained, a Democratic Senate and a Republican House of Representatives?
You don't. You don't get along, and that's not why I want to get elected. As governor of New Mexico, the state was 2-to-1 Democrat, legislature was 2-to-1 Democrat. I vetoed 750 bills while I was governor of New Mexico. I was an equal opportunity vetoer. I vetoed as many Republican bills, so a third of the bills I vetoed were Republican bills. Out of those 750 vetoes, only 2 were overridden. So it made a difference when it came to billions of dollars worth of spending. It made a difference when it came to all sorts of laws that, had they become law, would have resulted in more time and money to have complied with those laws. I believe, and this is unofficially, that I vetoed 100 bills where the vote in the legislature was 114-0. And the veto was upheld. You need to elect a leader who's going to stand up and articulate why we don't need more government. And they came out with a study on which presidential candidate had the best record when it came to job creation. Well, I actually had the best record when it came to job creation, and my response to that was the same as it was when I was governor of New Mexico. I did not create one single job as governor of New Mexico. The private sector creates jobs. But don't underestimate the power of the executive, and I had this as governor of New Mexico since I controlled all the agencies, since I appointed all the boards and commissions. I controlled all rules and regulations. And rules and regulations got better on a daily basis, fundamentally from the standpoint of costing less money and less time to have to comply with those rules and regulations. So business went to bed every night knowing that this was going to be a better situation, not a worse situation. Don't discount the President of the United States and the fact that without any legislation whatsoever, controlling all the agencies, controlling all rules and regulations, that you can have a tremendous positive impact.
Thank you, Governor. Jim Burns, how do you, or the alternative, how do you not work with a Republican House of Representatives and a Democratic Senate?
When I was taught history, they taught us that we had checks and balances in the United States Constitution. That's not exactly right. What we have is what is required is the cooperation of all the branches of government in order to enforce law. George Washington had it right when he said, government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. For good or ill, the way government works, it uses force against people to compel them to do what it wants. It puts people in jail. The glory of the United States Constitution is that it requires the cooperation of all the branches of government in order to put people in jail. So if you elect a president who is a libertarian and who believes in his oath of office and refuses to enforce unconstitutional laws, well, then you eliminate the problem whether Congress agrees or not. So I'm not looking to cooperate with Congress. What I'm looking to do is to enforce the Constitution of the United States and not allow the federal government to engage in activities which it is prohibited from doing in the Constitution of the United States. If I were president, I would obey my oath of office, which is to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Thank you.
We're going to get to some of the questions from the members of the audience in just a second here. But gentlemen, one thing that all three of you mentioned in your responses in our first half hour has been upholding your oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. What I'm interested, and Governor Johnson, we'll start with you, is how should the Constitution be interpreted?
Well, so one of the powers of the president, of course, is to appoint Supreme Court justices. And in that appointment process, the number one consideration should be appointment of judges based on original intent of the Constitution. So how should the Constitution be interpreted? I don't know if there's any plainer language that exists. And of course, what people, I think, fail to recognize is that there is three branches of government. The three branches of government are always trying to impose themselves on the other branches. All three are trying to garner more power, if you will. And that every law that has ever been passed is subject to constitutional review. And as much as we may disagree with laws that have been passed or interpretations of the Constitution, each branch has its ability to fix that, meaning court rules in opposition of what we think is constitutional. Well, then it's the obligation of the legislature and the executive to actually codify language that would change that court decision. So three branches of government always trying to garner as much power as possible. That is the balance of power. That is the reality. And in this case, I don't know if there is clearer language than the Constitution, but this is the process that we have, and governing from the standpoint of strict adherence to the Constitution, I think is fundamental.
Jim Burns, help us out here. How should the Constitution be interpreted?
Well, I agree with Governor Johnson. You've got to read it. They act as if they've never opened up the text. Heard Nancy Pelosi just the other day on TV saying that the bill that she said that you had to pass it before you could read it, so that how can it you possibly know whether something is unconstitutional if you haven't even read it? One thing that I would require is that if you can't read something, then you can't even vote it. Why would you even vote on it? These people are so irresponsible that, well, they don't take their oath of office seriously. They're not to be considered serious people because they're not serious about doing their job. I'm sorry, but they're not honest if they take an oath and don't even attempt in any fashion whatsoever to uphold that oath. We have a term for such behavior. We call them liars. They're cheats and thieves, and I'm sorry, they shouldn't get a pension.
Lee Wrights.
Well, this is actually a very good question. We get asked so many questions that I feel are sometimes inappropriate because we're asked things that the president really can't do. You know, part of being a good president is knowing what the Constitution says, knowing what you can do. James Madison is considered the father of the Constitution, appropriately since he wrote it. This is what he said about writing the Constitution. He said, every word in a Constitution is the difference between power and freedom. That's why we have to interpret the Constitution literally. It's not a living, breathing document. It doesn't change from day to day, and what it means, what it guarantees us. We're talking about a document that doesn't give us anything. It does not grant us one thing that we are not already born with. The Constitution observes things that have always been. The rights of the man. And I use man in the old school masculine term that's proper for English, not meaning to leave the ladies out. Human rights that have remained unchanged since the beginning of time. rights you have just because you're born. Not because you're born American. Not because you're born a certain color. Or not because you're born into a certain amount of affluence. Just because you're born. These are things we have to remember when reading the Constitution and interpreting it. Every word is the difference between power and freedom. Libertarians, we need to lean towards the freedom side.
Thank you. Gentlemen, it's interesting to bring up the issue of individual rights and freedom, because that goes actually to one of the questions from a member of our audience here, which goes to the issue of immigration. And so, Mr. Wright, we will start with you. How would you, as president, deal with the issue, not so much legal immigration, but illegal immigration?
I love this question. And I love having it first because they can't steal my answer. Immigration is actually the perfect way for libertarians to show how government gets in the way and causes more problems than it solves. Now, I say this because I saw a Stossel report 6-7 months ago. It was about immigration. And what he revealed to us is this: if you're a PhD and you live in, let's say, India, you want to immigrate to this country, you want to become a citizen. It takes you about 5 to 7 years to go through the process and become a citizen. Certainly, I see a lot of heads bobbing up and down, a reasonable amount of time. If you're a migrant worker and you come from Mexico, it takes you 131 years to go through the process. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I don't know that many 130-year-old people running around. When you make laws that are impossible to follow, no one's going to follow them. I mean, we have literally made it easier for people to swim the Rio Grande than to come here and climb out bureaucracy. It is ridiculous to believe that anyone's going to try and follow a law that's going to take them 130 years to follow. This is a wonderful opportunity for libertarians especially to show what we say all the time. Get government out of the way. Make it easier, as the governor says, for people to come here to work, to realize that American dream. We need the help. We can't do all the jobs we have to do, particularly if we quit making war all the time, and the prosperity that we will see from it starts to boom. We're going to need those workers. It's time that we reform immigration rather than keep screaming about building walls or keeping people out.
Thank you, sir. Jim Burns, how do we deal with the issue of illegal immigration?
The problem is government. Government gives things away, so why shouldn't people come here and get them? The answer is not to just not give it to people who come from foreign places. The answer is not to give it to anybody. The answer is to have freedom within the country and let people come here who wish to, but they do so at their own risk and for their own reward. If you take away the freebies from government, well, then you eliminate the problem. We had one of the greatest growths in our country in the early 1900s because we had a very, excuse the phrase, liberal immigration policy. This wasn't a bad thing, it was a great thing. But the people came here at their own risk, and they came here for their own benefit. And that's exactly what we should do to solve this particular problem. Right about it. Very good answer.
Governor Johnson, illegal immigration.
So, illegal immigration, bad. Legal immigration, good thing. Let's not build a fence across the border. And if we want to have a pilot project on that fence to see whether or not it's going to work or not, let's build a fence around Indianapolis and see how that works. Keeping Indianapolis citizens in or out. Let's make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and get a work visa to get a work visa. Not a green card, not citizenship, but a work visa that would entail a background check and a social security card so that applicable taxes would get paid. Now, implementing the fair tax, taxes aren't even an issue because whether you're legal, illegal, visitor, U.S. citizen, you're going to pay the fair tax. It's unavoidable. This is the problem with 11 million illegal immigrants in this country right now is a consequence, as an unintended consequence of Reagan when he set up his grace period in the 80s. He coupled that with putting government in charge of quotas, matching up businesses with immigrant labor, and that was a breakdown from day one. Fact is, if you want to come to this country and work, you can't get a work visa. And yet you know that if you can get across the border, even illegally, that you can get a job because you have friends and family that live in the United States and do get that work. We are getting the cream of the crop when it comes to workers from Mexico. With regard to the 11 million illegal immigrants that we have in this country right now, we need to set up a grace period whereby they can get a work visa. Would immigrants that want to come into this country stand in a line to get a work visa as opposed to crossing illegally if the line were moving? Absolutely. And then let's not for a second discount the problems on the border associated with border violence and the fact that that is a prohibition phenomenon. Legalize marijuana, arguably 75% of that border violence goes away, and we take giant steps toward rational drug policy, which is looking at the drug problem as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, another issue that actually is out there also comes up this Monday when the U.S. Supreme Court, in an unprecedented oral arguments, will spend 3 days hearing arguments regarding the constitutionality of the President's Affordable Health Care Act. I think it's safe to assume that all three of you oppose the President's health care plan. The question is, what libertarian approach would you take? And we will start, Mr. Burns, with you, to help address the country's growing budgeting healthcare crisis, where healthcare is destined to consume anywhere from 20 to 25% of our gross domestic product.
There is a problem. People get sick. So human beings try to solve that problem. The real difficulty is when they try to solve it with government. Because what happens is the problem doesn't go away. So they want to have more government try to solve the problems that they created in the first place. To say that we had free open election medical care before Obama was passed, we did not. We had socialized medicine, we had all the problems that go along with that. If they provide more than 50% of the medical care, well then, they are the ones who cause the problem. What you need to do is get the government out of the medicine business, because they ain't any good at it. And they cause more harm and call for more and more regulation. This Obamacare is moving toward the final step where government tells you what you can put in your bodies, what you can't put in your bodies. Well, they already do that. So they're making it even worse. What we need to do is to get the government out of the medicine business and let people find themselves the answers to the problems that they face.
Thank you. Governor Johnson.
Well, I support repeal of President Obama's health care plan. I don't think it's affordable and should be repealed. But let's not forget that just a few short years ago, Republicans controlled both houses of Congress and the presidency, and they passed a prescription health care benefit, which wasn't affordable then, and that's not affordable now. So it's both parties. It's the old parties that that have us in the situation that we're in, which is bankruptcy. We need to reduce healthcare costs. When people hear that I want to reduce Medicare and Medicaid by 43%, I don't think they should be falling off their chair. I think they should be recognizing that unless we do this, we're going to find ourselves without any health care at all. The real solution to health care is getting government out of health care. Genuine free market approaches to health care, which, by the way, I think that health care in this country is about as far removed from free market as it possibly could be. But what the government could do is systematically engage in this process of blowing the lid off of supply, of getting rid of alternatives that might exist when it comes to healthcare. When the whole healthcare debate started with Obama and let's make healthcare affordable, I had envisioned gallbladders are us. Clinics that would specialize in gallbladder surgery for thousands of dollars as opposed to tens of thousands of dollars. Your biggest cost was going to be a ticket to go get that surgery somewhere. But if you carry that to its logical extension, you're talking about advertised pricing. In a free market economy for healthcare, I would not have insurance to cover myself for ongoing medical need. I would buy health insurance to cover myself for catastrophic injury and illness, and I would pay as you go in a system that was very, very competitive with advertised pricing.
Thank you. Mr. Wrights.
Well, every time we get this question, I'm reminded of the PJ O'Rourke quote, where he said, if you think healthcare is expensive now, just wait till it's free. He's right. And both the gentlemen that have spoken before me, once again stealing all my good material, government's a problem. Government's what gets in the way. This is one area where I really can't understand how Americans will even buy into it. Folks, the government can't protect you when you're able-bodied at the mall. Why would you trust those same people to take care of you when you're old and feeble and can't take care of yourself? It just doesn't make any sense to me. When it comes time for me to go to the doctor and something's wrong with me, I don't want anybody in between me and him. I don't want a bureaucrat. I don't want a president. I don't want a senator. I don't want a House representative. I don't want my mother in the mix. And I don't think any of you do either. Something as important as your own life. I think it's deplorable that the Supreme Court has already ruled, basically, that you don't have a right to try to save your own life so that they can protect the FDA. The FDA is one of the cruelest death machines that government's ever created. Not just because they make us wait so long for life-saving drugs to come to market, but because they cost so much, because it takes so long for them to come to market. And once they get to market, that most of us can't afford to have them. I'm about stopping death everywhere I find it, whether it be the FDA or Afghanistan. I don't care. It's time for us to have life. Stop killing people everywhere we turn, everything we touch. Government's got to be gotten out of the way. Deregulation is the answer.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we're starting to enter into the last half hour of our candidate forum. And so I want to begin to circle back to some of the electoral issues. Looking out in this room, you see a number of folks who are libertarians from across the great state of Indiana. However, there is not a lot of, per se, diversity in this room. As America becomes more minority-majority in nature and demographic makeup, what would you do, or how would you, as a libertarian candidate for president, reach out to some of those minority, whether African American, Latino, or Asian communities? And we will start, Mr. Burns, with you.
This is difficult because I believe in equality of rights under the law, and I don't like to go out and seek people who are a particular ethnic background or just because they are a particular ethnic background. That's sort of racist, isn't it? They go out and look for black people just because they're black people. But nevertheless, we probably should do it, and I'm not opposed to doing it. It's just that what we need to do is to have the message. Send out the message that liberty is good for everybody. And if we do that, I think we will attract all kinds of different people. And it's the objective of the Libertarian Party to be sort of like the statue that has the blindfold. We're interested in people. They are. If all we have is white people, that's fine. If all we have is black people, that's fine. It doesn't matter. What we're after is the idea that people, no matter what color they are, ought to be allowed to live as they choose, so long as they don't violate the same rights of others. Thank you.
Mr. Wrights, how do you grow the party and reach out to minority communities that will soon be the majority?
by showing people what we say all the time. And our friends in Arizona have it right. Freedom is the answer. Now, what's the question? Now, of course, we just don't be flip about it. Every time I ask us a question, we just say freedom, and then look at it. Expecting them to get it. No. We have to be better about showing alternatives, true choices, rational alternatives, and examples of how freedom actually does work. We already know, people in this room, that freedom is the best thing for people. But liberty has no creed. Freedom, at least it should be, is colorblind. Those two things don't recognize race, creed, sex. Because they're for everyone. And everyone benefits when you have those things. And that's why we're not more diverse now, because we're not very good at explaining to people how freedom is the answer, how it's truly better for you as an individual. You know, we face the same problem that the founders faced during the American Revolution. Well, just the British they were fighting a mindset. These people had always, their whole lives, for generations, just listen to what the king told them to do. They didn't know. They didn't understand how freedom, making their own decisions, was good for them. It had to be demonstrated to them. That's what we have to do. We have to demonstrate how freedom and liberty are the answers to all the problems in this country.
Governor Johnson.
New Mexico has the highest percentage Hispanic population of any state in the country. 47% of New Mexicans are Hispanic. So I'm asked all the time, well, what did you do to attract the Hispanic vote? 47% of the state being Hispanic, 2-to-1 Democrat. What did you do? I didn't do a thing. The notion was level playing field for all. And people saw that. I made a name for myself vetoing bills. They had a cartoon caricature of me in an editorial cartoon that had me on a pogo stick, with at the end of the pogo stick being the word veto, and I had vetoed every square inch of the state. Everybody saw that. Everybody saw the notion of level playing field for all. Those vetoes didn't happen in a vacuum. So many of those vetoes had to do with corporatism. Had to do with the fact that government was for sale and politicians were selling it. And when it came to my desk, I vetoed that kind of stuff. Look, I share in the outrage of the Tea Party, which is let's stop spending money, let's slash spending. But I also share in the outrage of Occupy Wall Street, which is, this country is for sale. And it's been put for sale by both parties with their hands out for money to pay for special favors, whether that's an individual, a group, a corporation. It's for sale, and you can pay for your special place in line. So what people are really hungry for is this notion of level playing field. And I will tell you that as executive, my experience as governor of New Mexico, good government was easy. It wasn't hard. It was easy to create this level playing field, and people saw it. People saw it. There wasn't any question about what the advantage was when it came to when it came to the system, and seeing that opportunity for all was really what everybody wanted.
Thank you. Just have to take a little 5-second thing. Hey, Spank, you go ahead and grab me some coffee, dude.
Cream and sugar?
Yeah.
Splenda.
Sure. Preferably Splenda if they got it.
All right.
If they don't, submit a Libertarian thing, I'll take the equal. I'm waiting all morning to use that joke. Thanks, dude. I appreciate it.
I worked for you for 3.5 years, but nothing's changed.
And you're still not getting paid. We now return to our regularly scheduled presidential debate. Gentlemen, a major issue that has started to surface, particularly in Republican primary circles, is the issue of the culture and culture wars. Whether the issue is contraception, whether it is abortion, gay marriage, etc. How does a Libertarian candidate reconcile these issues, seeing how our country seems becoming more and more divided over these things? Governor Johnson, we will start with you.
Well, for starters, I completely agree. We don't want government making decisions when it comes to the way we live our lives. So I think libertarians embrace the notion of civil liberties. I have to point out an ACLU report 2 months ago, which graded all of the presidential candidates on civil liberties. And the report went as followed. 24 liberty torches was a perfect score. Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney had 0 liberty torches. Newt Gingrich had 4 liberty torches. President Obama had 16 liberty torches. Ron Paul had 18 liberty torches, and Gary Johnson had 21 liberty torches. I think people really care about civil liberties, and I think that's half the equation is civil liberties, and Republicans don't get it. And then that's half the equation. The other half of the equation is balancing a checkbook. And people want to see a balanced checkbook in the context of protecting and preserving civil liberties. Well, neither party is delivering on both of those sides. That's what the Libertarian candidate is going to deliver on. The Libertarian candidate is the only candidate that's going to be talking about gun rights and gay rights in the same sentence. A Libertarian candidate is the only candidate that's going to be saying slash welfare spending and slash warfare spending in the same sentence. I think Americans are hungry for change, and it's not going to happen with status quo. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results? Well, that's the two old parties, and that's what we can expect if we're going to continue down that path.
Mr. Burns.
I follow the Constitution of the United States. I think that on certain issues, the federal government doesn't have any business interfering at all about them. On other issues, for example, the Constitution is continually being violated. These are civil liberties that are being violated by the thing called the Patriot Act. There's nothing patriotic about the Patriot Act. There's nothing civil liberties about the Patriot Act. There's nothing, the rights of people are being violated in places like Guantanamo. The United States government is interfering in countries all around the world. The United States government is violating our rights, but there are certain issues that should be taken care of by the states and other issues that should be taken care of by the federal government. And the way you do this is you follow the Constitution of the United States, and let the president should enforce laws which promote individual liberty, and should keep his nose out of businesses that is none of his business.
Cultural wars. See what I mean? Our political rhetoric is rife with war. Every time some politician decides that he needs to save us from something else, he's got to have a war on something. And we've learned a few things over the years. You know, in the 60s, we had President Johnson, his Great Society, and have a war on poverty. We're going to wipe it out. Nobody's going to be poor anymore. Here we are, what, 50, 60 years removed, and we still have poor people in this country. President Carter came along and he told us, I know how hard it is for you to educate your children. I know your pain. So we're going to create a federal Department of Education. Churning out functional illiterates ever since. And then, of course, President Nixon gave us the greatest war of all, the drug war. War that kills more people than the drugs it's supposed to be stamping out. A despicable mess. A hole of blood, bodies, and money. And what we learned from all this, wars don't work. We never cure anything with these wars. We still have poor people. We still have ignorant people. You've got people locked up 24 hours a day 7 days a week with people watching them and videotape on them, and they're doing drugs every day. You can't get no better drugs than what you get in prison. They can't keep them out of prison, how are they going to keep them out of the country? Peace is the answer. We got to stop with all this war.
Gentlemen, I must commend you. We are doing very good on time. You guys keeping to the time limit for the responses, which actually lets me throw in one little extra question here as we get ready to come into the home stretch. I've always been a firm believer that as a candidate for public office, candidates are also human. And so it never hurts to give a candidate an opportunity to show his or her human side to the audience. So starting with you, Mr. Wrights, I must ask you, what was the last good movie you saw?
Jeez, dude, you could ask me a question I could actually answer. You know, I mean, I'm ashamed to say it, but I really can't remember the last time I sat down and watched a movie. Talk about being human, man. Bring it right on home, Martin. First of all, I didn't realize that candidates, in particular Libertarian candidates, are supposed to be human. I would say most places we've been so far, there's at least a handful of people everywhere that express this to be something else. What was the last good movie I saw?
Or bad movie.
I'm just trying to think of a movie at all. I looked at Thomas Hill, my campaign manager, for help because I probably watched it with him if I watched one. Oh man. I'm ashamed to say I cannot remember the last movie I saw. It's terrible.
Well, you may just want to grab Netflix at the hotel.
That's the bad part of it. I got Netflix. Just don't have time to use it. Well, I guess that shows how human I am. In all these debates, everywhere we've been so far, nobody's ever asked me a question I couldn't answer, except this man.
Governor Johnson.
In contrast to Lee, I am a moviegoer. I love movies, so the Academy Awards. The Artist, it was terrific. Hugo was terrific. The Help, if you haven't seen it, I mean, see these movies. And then just the other day we were talking about, I said I was going to Indiana, and I was talking to my son's partner, and she said that her siblings, her family lives in Indiana, and that they were training for the Little 500. And so I started talking about Breaking Away, that movie, and we just watched that the other night, and it was really terrific. So I'm the moviegoer, and my favorite movie is Dr. Zhivago.
Mr. Burns.
Well, I recently saw an old movie. What will you do without freedom? Braveheart.
Me, it was Dr. Strangelove. Go figure. Gentlemen, there'll be no fighting in the war room. It's a war theme today. So. Gentlemen, as we, like I said, as we get ready to come down to the wire here, one question that I've noticed, sort of a recurring theme in the questions from our audience, and Mr. Burns, we'll start with you. What will your presidential campaign do to help state Libertarian campaigns in 2012?
Well, I'm not in a position to help much of anybody. I can barely help myself. I'm going around doing the best I can, trying to promote the ideas of liberty. So as far as helping other Libertarian Party organizations, I have to sort of rely on them to provide an audience. I can't go out and recruit people to listen to me or to form an organization, but what I can do is go around the country and try to make friends, and that's what I'm hoping to do. I have a petition here. If you'd like to give me your contact information, I would very much like to send you emails from time to time. I have some literature, and I have a CD if you'd like to listen to it in your car. It's got stuff by Ayn Rand in there that I like to quote. So please contact me after the meeting. I have to be brief about it because I'm going to Kansas City right afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wrights, what will you do to help state libertarian political campaigns?
Well, that's a tricky question. Because once again, I had to point out how libertarians are different. Now, if this was a Republican panel or a Democratic panel, and all of us were running for the nomination for those parties, chances are we'd be fairly well known already. All of us would have name recognition like the governor here. But we don't enjoy that advantage like they do. So we have to kind of do things in a backwards manner. What we should be doing, particularly at the top of the ticket like this, is when we go to places like Indiana, Ohio, Texas, North Carolina, wherever you want to go, we need to seek out who the celebrities are there. Who's run your best campaign? Who's run your best Senate campaign? Who's run your best governor campaign? Who do the people in Indiana know? That's the guy I want to stand next to when I come here and campaign. I want everybody that Indianans know who are libertarians, I want them standing with me because I have to ride those coattails. They can't ride mine, you see. Now, something I am doing to help candidates throughout the state, of course, I hope all of you have heard about so far, is our commercials that we've been producing. Our first one came out not too long ago. We've made it editable so that any candidate, congressional, any state, any place, any time that want it, contact my campaign, we'll give it to you. You have 10 seconds at the end where you can edit in your own information, put your name in there, put your campaign in there. I'm trying to build tools that are not only good for this presidential race, but good for all races and good for all libertarians. That is what I'm trying to do. But as far as helping campaigns, we depend on your help a lot more than you'll be able to depend on ours. I believe that.
Thank you. Johnson, what would you do to help libertarian candidates across the country?
My favorite book is The Fountainhead. I really fundamentally believe that the best contribution that any of us can make to anyone else is to be the best that we can possibly be. And that by doing that, that has an effect. So when it comes to libertarian politics, the top of the ticket has impact on the bottom of the ticket, and that works both directions. What is really a game changer here is if the libertarian candidate for president this cycle gets 5% of the general election vote, which has never happened before, but I'm believing that that is possible. The Libertarian Party gets $90 million in federal matching funds. Now that would be an amount of money that would get controlled by the Libertarian candidate for president in 2016. And if I am fortunate enough to be the spokesperson for the Libertarian Party this cycle, I would look forward to doing that again. An investment on your part, an investment on my part. But $90 million is a game changer. When you consider the entire state budget of Indiana is $50,000, if I were directing that $90 million in 2016 to not apply that to all the states, which is growing the party and making the party stronger at the local state level, because that has an impact on the national level, and vice versa, an absolute game changer. $90 million. And for those that think, well, we shouldn't take federal matching funds, well, this is the way the two old parties have gamed the system. They've gamed the system. They're getting hundreds of millions of dollars.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, as we get ready to reach our last question here, it's something, once again, just from, I guess that tells me to stop talking. If we're only that easy. One thing, gentlemen, that comes up in political discussions between Republicans and Democrats is sort of what we call rhinos and Republicans in name only, dinos or dinos, Democrats in name only. What is your thought on what I've phrased as Linos? And is there such thing as a libertarian in name only? Governor Johnson.
So, if you look to the last cycle, Bob Barr was nominated as the Libertarian candidate for president. It's my understanding that Bob Barr did a really good job out on the campaign trail articulating what it is to be a libertarian. My understanding is he did a really good job. But he kind of had a wagon in back of him that he had to pull the whole time to have to be able to defend what he had done in the past. I want you to know I don't have that wagon, and I want you to know that there isn't anything about being a libertarian that I can't defend and won't defend. I mean, the ultimate goal here is no government, and that is the ultimate goal. But you have to set a path for no government. Being the athlete I am, you don't go from sitting on the couch to running a 5-minute mile. It takes a lot of work, but you got to set out a goal. You have to take little steps to reach that goal. So the goal is no taxes, and I'll just use that as an example. The goal is no taxes, and there's a way to accomplish that. When you start talking about abolishing departments like the FDA, that has to be the goal, and you have to be able to articulate what the problem is and how you actually accomplish that. And it isn't just the FDA, it's A through Z, and that's what it is to be a libertarian. I have to share with you. I went to the Florida State Convention a couple of months ago. I was at the State Fair, and I manned the State Fair booth there. I bought a Libertarian t-shirt. In my entire life, I have never worn a Republican t-shirt because there's certain Republican dogma that I cannot defend and have never defended and don't want to be in a position to defend. There is nothing about being a libertarian that I can't defend. When people talk about no government and how are you going to accomplish that, there needs to be an articulation of, yes, this is possible and this needs to be the goal, but then the pragmatism of how you actually get there. And when you talk about the problems that we face today, slashing government by 43% is unprecedented. And that's what I am trying to articulate in that ultimate goal of no government.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wrights, on rhinos, dinos, and know whether it's rhinos or linos, haven't quite figured out whether it's a short or long.
Sounds like a cartoon series, almost, I believe that human beings are self-identifiers. We get to call ourselves what we want to. Somebody else can call you whatever they want to, but it doesn't make any difference if you don't embrace it, if you don't take that cloak and put it on. So I don't spend a whole lot of time worrying about Libertarians in name only, or Republicans in name only, Democrats in name only. It makes no difference to me. I'm too busy working what I believe in. Never been anything but a libertarian. My father raised a libertarian without ever knowing what a libertarian was. Not sure my father's even ever voted. But he raised a libertarian. He raised somebody that knows it's better to mind your own business than to mind other people's businesses. Take care of yourself, not expect to be taken care of all your life. Simple things that we all learn. I mean, I tell people all the time, everybody, and I do mean everybody, is born a libertarian. It takes a good 10 or 12 years to turn them into something else.
Thank you. And Mr. Burns.
I am trying my very best not to criticize people. It is terribly hard. What I like to do is to at least give 7 or 8 praises before I give any criticism. Even if I'm trying to be, that's when I'm trying to be helpful. But I'm sorry, I am a human being, and sometimes people piss me off. There's just nothing I can do about it. And I'm often accused of being a little bit too critical. But I am trying to reform. And with your help, maybe I can reform. So please, when you see me criticize, praise me. No, I meant criticize me gently. It doesn't do you any good at all to tell me I'm ugly. I already know that. So go for the next thing and say, Jim, you got to calm down. If you do that, well, then we might all benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we're now coming to the end of our discussion. A round of applause for all three of these gentlemen. We're going to close our debate discussion forum with the way we began, with each candidate having up to 2 minutes for a closing statement. And we're going to start on this end and work our way down to Mr. Wright. We will start with you.
Well, once again, let me thank you for having us. It is truly our privilege to come and be with you, and for you to sacrifice part of your time, your valuable time. I know conventions are for business, and this is more or less entertainment. I like being entertaining, but I don't want to monkey in your business either. I know how important that is to you, so I appreciate you taking the time for us. Got to go back to being different. I hear it all the time everywhere I go. People scream about we need a difference in this country. We need to make a difference. And I'm sorry, folks, there's only one way we can do that, and that's be different. That should be fairly easy, like I said last night, because most of us are different already. Right, different. Some people say strange. They always say you're strange only because you don't agree with them. Only because we're fed up with the status quo. We're sick of what's being done to us every day. Washington, the State House, and City Hall. We've grown tired of what Democrats and Republicans think they can do to us, how much sway they think they have over our lives. The only way to change that, the only way that we can actually make a difference in this country is to be different. So let's embrace who we are. It's okay. I like most of you. I hope most of you like me. That don't mean we're not different. It doesn't mean that we don't believe different things. It's like I was talking about last night, though. We spend an inordinate amount of time arguing about the 2 or 3% of stuff we disagree with and seem to forget about the 97% of the stuff that we agree about. That's what we should be focusing on. That's what we should be concentrating on. So let's make the difference in 2012. Let's be different. Join me. Go to www.wrights2012.com and you'll see right there where it says, I am not at war. I invite all of you to say that with me. I am not at war. And if enough of us say that, they can't have it anymore.
Thank you. Governor Johnson.
I do view this as a job interview, and I really want this job. I arguably got to serve as the Libertarian governor of New Mexico for 8 years under the guise of being a Republican. This country is in really deep trouble. I think 3 promises to get us out of trouble is to balance the federal budget, stick to it to do that, so veto expenses that exceed revenue, and then let's reboot the entire American economy. Let's eliminate corporate tax, income tax, tax withholding, the IRS, and reboot the American economy. Make a tax system that's fair, something that everyone can see and everybody can participate in. Yesterday, 2 days ago, I was at 7% in a PPP poll against Obama and Romney, believing that Romney is going to be the nominee. I don't know, it was my name. I don't know if it was so significant that it was my name. It could have probably been anybody's name. If it was Mickey Mouse, I think Mickey Mouse would have been at 15% against the other 2. Point is, though, there is an opportunity here. And there's also an opportunity here with Ron Paul in that I do not think Ron Paul is going to win the nomination. Ron Paul asked me for my endorsement in 2008. I readily gave that. When I dropped out of the Republican Party, I asked everyone that was going to support me to support Ron Paul. But what happens to that support when that comes to an end? Well, I don't think there's any alternative other than those supporters looking to the Libertarian nominee first. That's the huge opportunity here. And the huge opportunity is to potentially poll at 15% and be on the national debate stage with the other 2 candidates, offering a clear alternative to what are the old parties. And that clear alternative, in my opinion, is embracing the best of both parties. I think it's going to be a clear choice, and if that happens, anything is possible. But it's an exciting possibility, and I would love to have the opportunity to be a part of that. Thank you very much, and thank you to these two guys. You know, a process like this, when you participate with two guys like this, it makes you stronger. Thank you.
I discovered the Libertarian Party in September of 1973. I've been active ever since. I don't like my chances to win the Libertarian Party nomination, but that's never stopped me before. What I'm out to do is to make friends. When I discovered the Libertarian Party in 1973, January 1974, I was elected state chairman. How do you get on the ballot when they wouldn't even let us register to vote as a Libertarian? I legally changed my middle name to Libertarian and ran in the Republican primary as Burns, James Libertarian. My name is James Libertarian Burns. What I'm now to do is to use strategy and tactics and to send a message. The major message that we need to have within our hearts and minds is that libertarianism is the most important work we can do for the human race. When we're successful, we'll bring peace, prosperity, and progress to the people of our planet. Please be my friend. I have a petition. I am so used to circulating petitions. If you haven't signed up already, please give me your contact information. I have brochures. Please come and get one, but we have to be quick because I have to leave very shortly. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to participate. Thank you.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, I will turn the microphone back over to Mr. Sam Goldstein, Chairman of the Indiana Libertarian Party. Gentlemen, thank you all very much for participating and being with us this morning.
Thank you.
Let's give these three gentlemen and Abdul a large round of applause for